Hi everyone, delonewolf here and welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. As always, let's start with a little bit of EVE news itself. So some of the stuff that I definitely noticed. The Alliance tournament is being cancelled for this year. There was sort of an implied promise that it would come back, but a lot of people are quite skeptical about that. And well, in line with what's also happening at Blizzard with esports and things like that, this is definitely starting to feel like quite a loss in the way that these companies are treating their games at the moment. There's lots of people that are very heavily invested in stuff like the Alliance tournament. That's really what they play EVE for, and to see that go away is definitely going to be a pretty big loss to those players there. I myself never really been involved in the Alliance tournament, so from my very selfish personal perspective, it's not that big a deal. But the real question is, how do you quantify something like an Alliance tournament? It's actually very difficult to do, but it is always a high point every year for EVE Online, for its player base, a little bit of a celebration of the best pilots, the most able structures behind those pilots to get them the very best ships. You sometimes have implications on TQ as well. Not sure, maybe the last Alliance tournaments, yeah, they were all on TQ if I'm not mistaken, the official ones at least, where they would actually like buy out certain ships so that the opponents couldn't get them anymore and things like that. So yeah, the Alliance tournament, being cancelled for this year is definitely a little bit of a loss. Next up we have the Guardians Gala, not doing that well in my opinion. It just doesn't feel rewarding enough for people or for me at least, to put a lot of effort in that, and I think the comments on my video did bear that out. And yeah, what I was a little bit afraid of is actually happening. All of those extra steps for those cerebral accelerators are basically putting a lot of people off of the event. It's perhaps because we've had it so easy in the past, of course, we have to keep that in mind, but on the other hand, it is definitely something that I'm not for. Perhaps you could have the better accelerators be something that need to be crafted, and then have the accelerators that just drop regularly be part of that process, be part of the industrial needs for those. But overall at the moment, yeah, I'm just back to regular exploration. It feels way more rewarding to get a couple nice faction pieces than it is to try and scrape some rewards from the Guardians Gala. It's a little bit unfortunate, but I really think that they need to keep that high accessibility, at least like a baseline for all of these events, so that alpha clones can just get in a ship, shoot some stuff, get some rewards for joining these events. But we'll see how all of that evolves in the future, of course. Let's first of all take a quick look at the New Eden store, where CCP has released some stuff around Valentine's Day, of course. So we've got a couple of Valentine's inspired fireworks, and then also the Eros Blossom skin line, which is also what's at play in the Guardians Gala. So for me personally, not a big loss. I'm not a big fan of pink on my ships, but there's always people that like to be a little bit different in New Eden, and thus it will find its place in the game, of course. But other than that, yeah, no massive sales or anything like that. There is a Plex sale going on, a 10% sale as well, or at least it was around Valentine's Day. We'll see if that has an impact, but on the New Eden store you've got some Valentine's related items if that's what you enjoy. And then of course we can go straight to the market. As always, we'll start with some Plex and stuff, and it's going to be at 410. Like that. And then if we press on Plex in Cheetah, as you can see, 3,660,000 disc buyers, very close to that. And if we go to the player owned trade hubs, 3.6 million for the sellers of Plex, and then the buyers, they are again very close to that. Almost no margin in the player owned trade hubs here. And then you can see here a little bit of a dip at the end, definitely on today's average so far. It is basically also this increased volume here, the 10% plex sale that is showing through on the chart. Quite a muted effect. That's a little bit of a surprise, but perhaps now, if I think about it, we've got a sale that is stopping the increase in price for plex. And then of course we also have the announcement that there will be no Alliance tournament this year, which I have to be honest, I do think will always have been lots of plex demand, because all of a sudden, yeah, people are investing to get those very best chips, to get that very best equipment to the team of their alliance, and thus that was, I think, always a pretty decent plex sink as well, a pretty decent chunk of demand as well. So will this become a double whammy that will stop the increased price for plex and will start the slowdown and the decreased price here in mid-February? I think it's a strong possibility, although I am not exactly sure. But what this means to me is, well, 3.6 million. We're still selling at around that price, and in GTA we're selling above that. If you have to, or if you want to sell plexes, if you want to liquidate some of that to get that liquid disk, I think that this is the time to do so, basically. The multiple pilot train certificate also stalling a little bit here at around 1.75 billion ISK on the chart, 1.74 for the sellers, 1.667 billion for the buyers. Quite expensive, of course, 1 year high. Great time to sell if you manage to grab some, let's say, below a billion ISK, which, well, it's half a year ago and a year ago, but there were definitely opportunities to do so. I've always warned you guys about volumes, and you can see with these high prices, volumes are definitely very low. So selling 50, 100 of these now is not going to be doable, but you know, trying to grab profits on one or two is definitely something that should be doable. For the skill extractors next, same pattern yet again. We've got 1 year high points and then a little bit of stalling at the end. We will have to see if this is just a temporary stall, as I've said, from the sale of plex, which of course does ripple through this entire category, or if this is the start of the decline of prices towards, well, already the winter hype, which does tend to happen in EVE Online. You have more activity, you have more people coming back to the game because it's winter time, there's not that much to do, and then as we get closer to the summer, you will see a decrease in activity in the game, which usually, it's not always the case, but which usually also correlates with a decreased demand and price for plex. So we will see. It does often happen that you've got a January, February spike, and that then you start a slow decline towards the summer. So is this what's happening now? That is, in my opinion, a pretty important question, but we'll need a couple more weeks to see what happens there. For the injectors then, we have the large scale injectors that are continuing to increase in price. So that does show that there is still a lot of demand for skill points, which will also translate to demand for plex. So this is one that we could put in the category of no, it might be that all of this will just be a temporary effect from the sale, and that will be back on the upswing after that. And we are basically at a high point, 890 million on the chart, and it's almost 900 million ISK for the sellers of a large scale injector, and the buyers are coming in at 876 million ISK. They have really been forced up quite a lot by the market. This is still a market that is dictated very much by the sellers. They are the ones that can demand a price from the market, and the buyers basically have to follow suit. At least that's the case at the moment when prices are so high, and there does seem to be a lot of demand for these skill points. The small scale injector, same thing, still increasing its price as well, and now we have a data point above 180 million ISK, yet again 1 year high point. 182 million for the sellers, 170 million for the buyers. That's a bit more margin between these two. That's quite a surprise to see this difference, but I must also say that this is quite an incredible chart for people that made the trade, of course, in November here, just 1, 2, 3, 4 months ago, probably less than that. We were close to a 1 year low point. A great opportunity was there after decline, and we don't even see, and let's take a quick look here at the large scale injectors as well. Same thing, right? With this weird pattern of a couple of months of hovering at that 700 million price range, and apparently the story there was that we had so many sales in the multiple pilot train certificates that the skill point farmers, the guys that have characters dedicated to only creating skill points and then extracting them, putting them in the injectors, had such a massive backlog and such a large supply of, well, discounted skill points from their perspective, of course, because it didn't cost them a lot to keep those characters training, that we had this massive opportunity here where we had these skill injectors at a really discounted price. And then what happened here December, January was that CCP announced the gifts from Christmas, including a special accelerator that allowed you to grab all the skill points from, I think it was up to 3 skill injectors, thus massively all of a sudden increasing demand. At the same time, we also have Plex, of course, increasing in price here as well. A little bit of a delayed response there, but both of these really did make for 4 months. That's all you needed to make an incredible trade in these skill injectors. For the large skill injectors, from 700 million ISK to now 900 million ISK, that's definitely not bad. And then for the small skill injectors, you could probably have bought these for around 140 million ISK and now selling for 182. That is very, very nice, and I must say I personally do like some probably large skill injectors as your hedge for inflation if you're looking for that larger investment where it's, well, close to 1 billion ISK in one go. There you go, couple of large skill injectors. You're gonna get the effect of inflation from Plex, and then you have this unknown factor that can be influenced by many sides of the game in the skill points themselves contained within these large skill injectors. It makes it a little bit more speculative, but it still has that characteristic, in my opinion, of being a hedge, a protection against inflation because of its Plex component basically through the skill extractor. So these are very, very interesting items, and I personally have to see about maybe starting my own investments. Of course, it's not the right time to do so, but if I do a little bit more of that, I think that some skill injectors will be on the menu when I find the right time to buy them. And now we have the daily alpha injectors that are landing back at 60 million ISK, a little bit as expected. We had a massive CCP sale as well. Obviously, we could have grabbed some of these at less than 40 million ISK, and if you did so on these increases in price, I always told you guys to be a little bit patient, because I do think that considering where the other skill injectors were heading, that we were looking at a complete recovery of the daily alpha injectors, and we're basically there now. These are selling for 60 million ISK, bars coming in at 57 million ISK, so you've got an easy 50% profit that you could have grabbed thanks to a single CCP sale. Again, keep the volumes in mind, but this is not so bad, right? An easy 500-600 a day for these daily alpha injectors should really allow you to make your trades happen here. And that is our lessons learned. I think we're close to 1 year high point on this entire category. We do have a sale now, and some, well, I think some people will perceive this as bad news in EVE Online in general, and as a result I think that this might also be very close to a turning point, because, well, here in Belgium especially, the weather is starting to be a little bit nice. We've got this very early spring feeling with 13-14 degrees Celsius, and yeah, that is going to start showing through the game as well, I think, as winter starts to end in the northern hemisphere. Next up, we have the minerals at 1310. Like that, and we'll start with titanium, which has basically not moved and is basically stuck on that 4.5 ISK barrier on the chart here, which is it's not great, but considering where we are at in the mineral market, I would say that this is still a reasonable price for titanium. It is, of course, the most bulky item to move around when it comes to the minerals. Very difficult to do so, and as a result, for some reason, this still gets quite a bit of a premium when you have it available. And look at that, 4.52 ISK for the sellers. That's exactly the same as last week with 1.6 billion units, 1.1, another 1.1 billion, another 2 billion units, and that's just from 461 to 452. So there are still people trying to unload lots and lots of titanium. Buyers have lowered their price to 431. That is going to put a bit of pressure, of course, and you can see that the volumes here, well, we do have one buyer at 2 billion units, but at 422, that is where the investors start to say, okay, that's basically a no-brainer. for me to try and grab that titanium. But the difference here between the supply in the latest orders and the demand from the buyers does to me indicate that the pressure is going to continue, and that at some point the market is going to say, some sellers are going to say, what the hell, let's go below 4.5 ISK, and then we're off to the races towards 4.3 pretty quickly. I think that's my expectation for titanium. This pressure is still there, and I don't think it's gonna stop. For pyrite next, we had a very nice little recovery. You always have to keep this in perspective, of course. Pyrite used to be way more expensive, probably 2 to 3 times more expensive than titanium, I want to say here. And seeing this decline here to 3.3 ISK was actually, like a massive discount, showing that pyrite was, well, a lot easier to transport, but also super available, way more available than needed in the game. And as a result, we went to this 1 year low point to basically making pyrite the cheapest mineral in the game, which is actually kind of crazy considering the amount you get for mining for titanium compared to mining for pyrite. You're always going to end up with way more titanium than pyrite, yet pyrite is cheaper. But that recovered a little bit, 3.8, and then trying to get towards 4 ISK. Didn't quite succeed, and I think we'll see that on the volumes again. 1 billion units, 1.4 billion units, another billion units here. Compare that to the buyers with 32 million units, and then 1.6 billion units here at 359, which is probably, which has been here for a while. That is basically the problem. Whenever these increase in price, the stocks come out of the closets, and people just dump a lot of that, crushing those prices very quickly. So it's 3.7 ISK for the sellers and 3.6 ISK for the first buyers, but just the volumes aren't there. You could say that it's actually going to go below 3.6 ISK very quickly for the buyers. And so we see again here the pressure at the tail end after a little recovery in pyrite. It was really nice to see that we were finally crawling out of that hole, out of that pattern of just lower prices. Again, another lower price. 3 ISK here at this point was kind of crazy. Investors did start to make a move on that then, but here at the end again, any increased price does get snuffed out very quickly by more supplies, people having stocks that they want to sell at even the slightly better price. Next up, we've got Mixelon in the same boat, of course, after having a really good year in 2018, actually holding very strongly to 70 to 75 ISK for quite a long time, which was, well, even historically speaking, a very good price for Mixelon. Finally, after the summer here, it was just untenable. Too much mining, not enough destruction, not enough big wars in the game. And so we went down to 55 to 60 ISK here, where we are hovering at the moment, which is still okay, I guess, but looking at what we were able to sell Mixelon at last year, this does feel kind of bad, to be honest. 59.4 ISK for the sellers and 55 ISK for the buyers. Yeah, buyers trying to pull that one down a little bit. Again, here notice the 400 million units, 240 million units compared to the buyers at 35 million, 15 million. That is quite a problem. You have to go down quite a little bit, and you're finding one sell order, buy order at less than 55 ISK for 77 million units, but it's again showing that there is too much supply, and thus I think we're already starting to have some pressure on the daily average. You can clearly see that we went up to 60 ISK a little bit, but then in the last 4 or 5 days the pressure is back on because of fresh supply, of course. That's what's happening at the moment with minerals. I must also say that, if I'm not mistaken, if something big were to happen in Nalsec, Mixelon does tend to be their local bottleneck. The one mineral that they can't mine enough of to keep up with everything else, and as a result the potential increase in price I do think is much more pronounced in Mixelon, but it would require, like, a dozen titans to be gone, and with all their support fleets and things like that, but then Mixelon could be the first one to be primed for a bit of a real recovery back to its average price. Next up, we have Isogen, where we have a really weird pattern again. Very bad news for Isogen, of course, diving down to 15 ISK, historically a crazy low price for Isogen. I think we at some point have sold Isogen for like 500 ISK and things like that. So this is really another one, just like Pyrite, that has just been clobbered by the changes to the game when it comes to mining, mostly by the raw call, of course. But over the couple of months just before the year here, and even in January, we had this nice slow upwards recovery from 15 ISK to probably 17 to 18 ISK here. But you can see here again at the tail end that is stalling. We get a big volume spike, and so now we are selling Mexilon at 1672, first one coming in, and the buyers at 1657. So the pressure is back here, and the upwards momentum that some of these minerals, especially the super low ones, had, I think is being stopped at this point. And that is where I think lots of investors now that have bought here, and same thing for pyrite, you can see here, that have bought at this 3 ISK, I think that they are going to be watching this very, very closely. And unfortunately, if they feel like the state of the game is such that we are going to continue this down to again that 15 ISK mark and maybe even break that, then you will see them dump their investments before that happens, and then that might just precipitate us to a new low point. I think that's the riskiest part of making these investments. You know, you always risk catching a falling knife, of course. Next up, we have Noxium that for the year has actually done really well, and to my surprise again, I keep predicting that we're gonna start moving in the 275 to 300 range very soon because of all the other minerals, of course. But nope, Mexilon surprising me again in the positive, back to a more than an average price of more than 300 ISK here, 307 ISK for the sellers and 293 for the buyers. And despite the higher volumes, which are, well, 4 times higher, and here we've got another 38 million units, it's not as crazy as some of the others, and is doing really well. So if you want to focus on something that has been able to maintain its price range over the last year, then that would be Noxium. Yeah, in high sec, if you're not mining from a moon, then I would say that trying to grab Noxium, maybe build up some Mexilon stocks, and then the Tritanium on the side would be my mix for mining at the moment. Then we have Zydrine that is landing at 500 ISK basically. 517 for the sellers, 488 for the buyers. I'm a bit surprised by that wider margin here between sellers and buyers. And then you have that typical pattern here again, 2.3 million, 3 million, 1.8 million, 2.8 million. And then down here you've got some bigger stocks that are being sold as well with 16 and 18 million units. These are corporations that mine from moons and that bring their weekly, bi-weekly, maybe even monthly supplies to the market. And so they've completely changed the dynamic here. You've got lots and lots and lots of supply in small and smaller sell orders as well, competing with each other, driving that price down. Of course, also due to the increased availability of Zydrine, but there is this constant competition that is again going to make it very hard, I think, for Zydrine to really make a big recovery, although it did so in December from 400 to 500 ISK. But unless something big happens in Nosek that really drives substantial amounts of demand for these minerals, we're gonna stick in this pattern of just bring more to the market, and these guys, they don't mind undercutting each other by 0.1, as you can see here, 0.41, 0.42, 0.44, 45, 46, 47, 48, 49, 50. So this is really what is happening here. All these small individual players do try to sell their Zydrine, depending on what they've managed to mine that week, but it's a recurring pattern. Every 2 weeks my moon blows up a chunk and you can go and mine there, and these guys probably have similar patterns, maybe weekly, maybe bi-weekly, which means that there is this constant supply that is too much for the game at the moment, that is constantly putting pressure on the price. Megasite is in the exact same boat. You can see that we also had this little December recovery when we did dive down to less than 400 ISK. Volumes increased, so some people decided to invest, but here at the end we can again see us landing at 500 ISK and that's exactly what I was talking about here. 515, 509, but then they're starting, you know what, 5.4 million. I want to be sure that I sell this 499.99, and the next one comes in. You know what, I also want to have that ISK for what I've mined this week. Here's 2 million units, 499.98, and that is really the new pattern in what were formerly known as Nullsec minerals, Zydrine and Megasite. You've got smaller amounts, but you've got a lot of competition on the market. Buyers are down to 486. It's still higher than the Zydrine buyers, so that is actually not. It's actually lower than the Sideline buyers. And as a result here, I would say that these are also going to continue that slow decline unless something changes by CCP, or unless, of course, we get like a big war in Nosik or something like that. Unfortunately, the pressure is back on across the board in the minerals. Oversupply is here. More fight then, that's going to be more bad news if you're looking to sell stuff and if you're looking to actively mine a lot of stuff. Stuck at 7,780 is pretty much. Sellers are at that price and buyers are at 7,750. So here the market is saying that that is so cheap, historically speaking, that there are often enough investors that are grabbing that cheap more fight, expecting something to happen in Olsek at some point. And this, of course, tied to take 2 ships, take 2 fleets, so you don't need a massive super capital brawl to make something happen in this market. And as a result, I can definitely understand that we have this stronger demand here, a bit more competition in the demand for more fight than in the other minerals. And then we're gonna move on to PI at 25.25. Like that. Let's see if there's some ISK flowing back into these advanced PI materials now. We do have the broadcast nodes getting back to 2.1 million on the chart. 2.1 million, a bit above that for the sellers, but the buyers are still staying below 2 million ISK. So we are seeing this seesaw pattern to a well below average price back to a slightly below average price of around 2.1 million ISK. And it does show that demand just isn't strong enough at the moment in the advanced PI materials. But from time to time, people do come in with bigger volumes. And I can understand that these are investments that you need to make right now if you want to be ready for the next big structure announcement. So makes a lot of sense to me that we do have this seesaw pattern, that whenever we reach 2 million on the average price, you get a bit of an uptick in some volumes, and that we have people taking their positions in these markets. But it's obviously still selling well under the average price most of the time. So if you're looking to make your own structure for the first time or something like that, know that it is very doable. You have a very reasonable price for the resources needed for that. Construction blocks next, back under pressure, heading back to less than 11,000 ISK, so back to a below average price. It's still 11,400 ISK for the sellers, but 10,200 for the buyers is driving the average prices back down. So yeah, we're back to a less than average price here as well. Consumer electronics though, making a little bit of a recovery. That is nice, because if I'm not mistaken, I have bought some consumer electronics at 10,700 ISK, now selling for 15,000 ISK. That's definitely one that I think I'll try to take my profits on. 13,150 for the buyers as well, so they have been forced up. Nice little recovery from consumer electronics. 15,000 for the sellers is sellers above average, which is very nice. So here on this decrease, I made an investment and I am going to try to take my profits. Nice to see a little bit of volatility as well, and a breakout to a more than average sell price in one of these non-fuel related PI materials. Talking about fuel related PI materials, this is starting to be pretty crazy. Coolants have been up pretty much for an entire year, managed to stay to 11,000, 11,500, something like that, for quite a while, constantly. Yeah, looks nice. 1 year high points, very, very good. At some point, we're gonna have to pay the piper. Well, nope, the market is going even higher now, a jump up to 15,000 ISK for coolants, which is now finally, to me, explaining a little bit why nitrogen fuel blocks jumped up to 28,000 as well, a 23.58% increase in price over 1 week. Well, interesting to see what's happening with fuels there at the moment. So coolants are now selling for 15,200 ISK. Gas planets get those in production. 14,400 ISK for the buyers. They have been forced up as well. Very, very interesting situation. 1 year high point. Crazy good price for coolants, especially if you look at where we started off last year. 8,750 to 15,000. Well, that's not exactly a doubling of the price, but we're pretty decently close to that. Enriched uranium doing the same thing, although a little bit slower, but basically also coming to 15,000 this year, 15,700 in fact for the sellers, 14,650 for the buyers, yet another 1 year high point. Integrity response drones, that's an advanced PI material. Again, you can clearly see that we are below average here. 2.4 million for the sellers, 2.3 million for the buyers. So again, here I would say if you're looking to invest or if you're looking to make your own structures here, just try to buy here a bit above 2.3 million, and I think you'll be able to grab those pretty easily. Mechanical parts tied to fuel still well above average, staying in the 11 to 12,000 ISK range, not breaking out like coolants and enriched uranium, but 12,000 for the sellers and 11,700 for the buyers. Here these buyers are very important, showing this strong demand in the mechanical parts tied to fuels. That is definitely part of the pattern at the moment, and as a result we have a very nice price still. Nuclear reactors next, hovering in the 90 to 100,000 ISK range. That's not so great. 105,000 for the sellers, 91,500 for the buyers. I was hoping that this increased price here from 90 to 110,000 would be the start of more volatility. But of course, if you look at the rest of the non-fuel related PI materials, we'd need some of those to break out a bit more, like consumer electronics, to get that party started, I think. Organic mortar applicators, again advanced PI, so look for that below average price. Sometimes you can grab it for around 1 million ISK, 1.1 million for the sellers, a bit above 1 million for the buyers. Here I would say, just like with coolants and fuels, you know, this was the time to buy, this is the time to sell. Are we at the opposite here for advanced PI materials? Well, if you're gambling on another big structure announcement, then yes, this is the time to take those positions, of course. So we had the organic mortar applicators. Next up, we've got robotics tied to fuels, but it is a bit different because it is specialized, so it's a tier up from the previous ones. And as a result, that one is staying on an average price. You can see for the year, 100,000 to just below 100,000 ISK. Not much to say there. 100,000 for the sellers, 94,000 for the buyers. Robotics actually doing quite okay over the year here, and it's even historically speaking a normal price for robotics, whereas coolants at 15k is definitely even historically speaking a very good price and a way above average price here. Self-harmonizing power cores also struggling to get back to those averages. 2.2, 2.3 million, yeah, 2.25 million I think should have been possible, but nope, we're staying above 2 million, a bit above 2 million, just below 2.1 for the sellers and just above 2 million for the buyers. These are, in my opinion, investors that are trying to grab those self-harmonizing power cores now, getting ready for an eventual sale when the hammer drops and CCP announces, for instance, the propaganda towers. Superconductors, dipping back to a below average price here on the chart, I would say. 12,000 for the sellers, 11,252 for the buyers. That is definitely buyers below average and sellers a touch below average. Nice volatility here though over the last couple of months. Some very nice sell opportunities at 14,000 ISK here, so it's something that I'm producing as well. I'm a bit lazy when it comes to actually selling it at the right time. But maybe I should also mention that I saw that PI taxes up to like 19% in Dital, not that great. I may have made the system a bit too popular and thus a bit too attractive for a bigger group to grab that. I'm gonna start playing with the idea myself. As you guys know, I have been thinking about a next base of operation for Co-Incorporated. Not that I'm abandoning Dital. I want to keep the services there up and running as well, but just to have that backup place for me to run whatever I want to run in EVE Online. And the next target would be Minmatar space. And as a result, what I might do is move my PI activities over there, looking for better taxes in, well, what is normally the lowest populated space. But then I have a jump clone so that I can still spend most of my time in Dital, but start building up that Minmatar base of operations. I think that that's going to become like my next goal in EVE. Next up here, we've got the test cultures. But yeah, no... basically what I wanted to say, know that in Dital at the moment, taxes are very expensive for PI. You might actually be better off just risking it in nullsec, which is one jump out, or looking for PI in the surrounding systems. Next up here we get the test cultures, bouncing up from the 8,000 ISK mark, 8,800 ISK for the sellers and 8,350 for the buyers. They've been forced up a little bit, so here we are not at the lowest points anymore. And then the wetware mainframes, advanced PI, same pattern. In fact, around 10 days ago, we were close to a 1-year low point at 2.1 million on average, 2.3 million almost for the sellers and 2.2 million for the buyers. So a bit of a recovery, but staying below average for sure. Next up, we have our advanced moon materials coming in at 34.30. Like that. As always, let's start with the carbonites. These are still slowly going down, but staying on that below average price range, so that's a bit of a no for me. Ferrite carbide dipping down again to 150. Buyers are coming in at 144. I would still say that if you're looking to buy some advanced PI materials, ferrite carbide makes a lot of sense to try and grab it. Let's say 145 or something like that. You're grabbing it below the entire chart. That is still pretty good, I think. Next up, we have the titanium carbide that is basically got back to an average price, 225, something like that. I think it was actually a normal price. Is now going back down a little bit, so 201 is for the sellers, 187 for the buyers. It's a below average price, but it's not a great price. Tungsten carbide tried to dip back, but as you can see here, we need to break 175. That just didn't happen, just shy of that. I do think if you manage to grab some of these close to that 180, then you are looking at a decent investment, because tungsten carbide is already selling at 280 ISK again. Buyers are forced up to 205, so this might have a little bit of a momentum to get back towards an average of 225, but I myself do not pull the trigger too early on buying advanced moon materials. I really want to have that certain investment and to get a nice profit out of it, which, well, I always look at the historic pattern to try and find that opportunity. Maybe a mistake here and there, but I personally feel like it's better to be a bit safer and a bit more patient than to grab this at the wrong time, especially with all the changes to the sources of these materials. For the metamaterials, we've got photonic metamaterials that is again still slowly creeping down towards that 15,000 ISK mark. So I would say here I have more patience than this. 17,000 for the buyers. No, I'm looking at 15,000 for the buyers. Get rid of all of this 16,000 etc. Market, and it's slowly doing so, right? We're coming here from 18,000, 19,000, and we're slowly decreasing our average prices, so that it might actually happen at some point, but we will need a little bit more patience, I think. Plasmonic metamaterials in the exact same boat, although this is again getting very close here. 18 to 19,000, almost 19,000 for the sellers, 17,800 for the buyers. Just, you know, get rid of a couple more, just 3 more here, and then you're like 16,500. Find that on the chart, and then there we go. That's personally what I'm waiting for, and plasmonic metamaterials is definitely one to look out for. It might just happen, and you can see the pattern here. Since December, we do have this constant pressure on these advanced moon materials. For the non-linear metamaterials, also a bit of pressure at the tail ends, but nowhere near the 20k, 22,000 still for the sellers, then 21,000, and then here is where I would love to compete for some non-linear metamaterials. And finally, terahertz metamaterials actually jumping up a little bit in the last week, back to 25,000, back to an average price. So a little bit of a lack of supply here. 25,000 for the sellers is probably an okay price if you actually have some of these available. And the buyers are actually forced up here as well to a very close 24,600 ISK here. So very nice actually. Terahertz metamaterials, I mean, when will you have grabbed some really cheap ones? That was a while ago, but all of a sudden 25,000 here is the average price, I would say. And so especially for producers, this is probably what they're going to try to focus on, of course, with what they're bringing to the market. But this is a nice little opportunity to actually exchange ISK for this good. Then we have the other advanced moon materials, fermionic condensates, actually slowly stepping its way back to an average of 100,000 ISK here. 98,000 for the sellers, 95,000 for the buyers, back to an average, now still slightly below average price, but definitely getting there. Ferrogel next, stepping up as well towards 50k here all of a sudden, 49,000 for the sellers, 48,000 for the buyers, and again below average, but not by that much anymore. Fullerides though is dropping again, hesitating on a couple of occasions here, 1100, 1000, then getting close to 900 just a couple of days ago. 966 for the sellers, 966 for the buyers, unfortunately, so the margin is completely gone. What I do like about this, 3 million units, 3.6 million, 8 million units here. Compare that to the buyers, 1 million, 100,000, 150,000. Yeah, people are very hesitant. I think the sellers might just overdo it here, and we might be in for an interesting week for Fullerite. Another one that I would keep a close eye on if you're looking to invest in advanced move materials. Hypersynaptic fibers continuing the decline as well, playing with 11,000 ISK. Buyers coming in at 11,200 ISK. Here you have to make a choice. Do you disregard the very start last year? And then this does look like a very nice place to start your investments for hypersynaptic fibers here. Half a year of constant pressure coming down from 16,000 to now 11,000 ISK. It's not bad. It's definitely not bad. I would be very careful, then maybe even double careful with my volumes here, but this could be one that you would start to maybe dollar cost average. Try to grab some now, see if the pattern continues next week, try to grab a little bit more, and if we ever get close to that 10k, then of course you can try to grab the bulk of what you want. But this is, if you look at this chart over the last even 10 months, this is actually looking pretty good. But then unfortunately, where do we come from? An even better opportunity. Nano transistors staying on a less than average price, but again, not nothing to jump on, I don't think. Phenolic composites, well, some people jumped on that a little bit. 2000 ISK here for quite a while. That can't last forever. 2200 now for the sellers, so 10% profit at this point. I would say too early, and the buyers are at 2100 ISK. So obviously a little bit of a jump up here on probably some investments made. That definitely makes a lot of sense. Ceramic fibers next, again stuck on that below average price. So you can see the pressure in the advanced move materials in general, I think, and you've got opportunities here and there, in my opinion, I think, to start to grab some of these on the cheap and thus be ready for, I think it'll take a pretty massive Gnostic war, really alliances trying to kick someone out of that to really completely disrupt the supplies that they have, that they bring to the market in general. I'm not talking about big groups just selling everything in JITA, but just, you know, cutting off like a certain percentage of the supplies throughout the universe is going to have an impact on these prices. And so that's what you should get ready for, I think, slowly though. That would be my advice. Take two ships next, coming in at 42.10. Gonna be a long one here, I think. Let's take a look at that. I think here we're looking for the same thing. Try to find cheap Take two ships to start investing in. If something explodes in nullsec, then Take two ships do come to the fore, and then you've got spikes like this up to 40 million for the Ares, for instance, although I think that was before the changes. 27.7 million for the sellers, 26.3 million for the buyers. You can see the lack of demand at the moment because of the lack of action. So here it is the same thing. Find the right opportunities and try to grab them. The Ares, well, if you grab a couple at these prices, you're definitely looking at cheap ones. The Basilisk knew a nice little spike up to 300 million ISK. So that is the volatility that we used to love in the Take two ship market. It's not that easy to find these days, but apparently in the logistics cruisers, that did happen over the month of January. Look at that, buy for 200, sell for 300. We're now selling for 248, buyers at 231. So we're obviously on the downside of this again. So a bit too early to say we're going to grab this. Cerberus, same thing, right? Could have seen a low point at 200. We're still below average, but not that interesting or outspoken. The Crow, though, was very, very low all of a sudden here at 26 million on average. Buyers are still at 25 million, 27.8 for the sellers here. And is it a missile ship? That's what I'm not exactly sure about. Yeah, it is a missile ship in my opinion. This does make a lot of sense, and I'm quite surprised at the low volumes here despite the increased price. And so just a couple of buyers are snagging up some very cheap crows at the moment, and you can still do so. Buyers are coming in at 25 million ISK. Yeah, I would say a couple of crows, be ready. If they do want an interceptor fleet at some point in a big fight, then I think these cheap crows will be very attractive to whichever alliance needs them. The Guardian, same logistics spike, of course, went up to 300 million ISK here on the daily average as well, is now back down to 230 or something like that, 230 for the sellers, to 15.5 for the buyers, back to buyers definitely below average here. Heretic went to 60 million, a little bit of a bump on that one. Buyers are still at below 61 million ISK. Look at the lack of buyers on the Heretic here again. Look at the supply, 115, 26, 20. That is too much. I kind of like this one actually. Interdictors tend to be primaries a lot in bigger fights, and as a result you do get spikes when the need is great for them all of a sudden. But you are dependent again on something happening in Nullsec, but if you want to get ready for that, this I think is the pattern that you're looking for. No buyers, still hundreds of them coming in on the chart here, and so you're definitely buying well below the chart. Average price 80 million normally for a Heretic. The Hound is coming back under pressure as well. Buyers are at 27 million, 28 million for the sellers. I have a couple of these that I bought on the cheap. So again, that would be my advice. Keep an eye out for the real buy opportunities. The Crow, that is very pronounced, for instance. Next up, we've got the Ishtar actually going back up a little bit. I think that might be due to the Guardian's Gala. It's not a bad ship, I think, which should allow you to guide around a lot of the damage and to actually have the drones do a lot of the work here. So we get a little bit of a comeback up to 250 for the Ishtar, to 61, 62 in fact for the sellers, 243 for the buyers, back to a normal price for an Ishtar, I would say. Manticore also jumping up back to 35 million, is 36.5 in fact for the sellers, still 29 million for the buyers though. Shows that it's a movement that might get snuffed out very quickly, but you can see we touched 30 million, investors came in and brought the price back up here. The Munin is again very low, close to 1 year low point. That is really interesting, in fact, in my opinion. 225 for the sellers, 213 for the buyers. Munin definitely a candidate if we try to make 210 or something like that happen. We're talking here on the chart. Very, very interesting here, the Munin. Show a little bit more of the detail in the chart, and you can clearly see that we are again playing with 1 year lows for this ship, and we know that it has been at least a doctrine in the biggest group in the game, so that might be a very interesting one to try and snag a couple of. The Nemesis jumped back up to 27.5 million, 27 for the sellers, 25 for the buyers. Now this does bring me back to my very old thinking in the Tech 2 ship market. When the moon mining changes were first announced, we paid this massive premium because all the bosses were gone and everything needed to be started up, and I kept waiting for that second leg back down where frigates would generally find their price around 25 million ISK or so. And it looks like it's finally happening here for the Nemesis. For instance, we are definitely moving into 25 to 30 million range. So here below 25 million, that's where investors can start to grab some cheap Nemesises. And then of course you need to wait for the right loss, the right fleet to be lost in order to get those spikes up to above 30 million ISK. And that is the trading pattern that I was personally looking for. And so on a couple of these, if I look at my ticker, for instance, Hounds 25.2, Nemesis 24.5, Manticore below 28 million, I'm starting to try to find that pattern and to grab the right ships at the right time. The Oneros next, 218 for the sellers, so back up a little bit at the moment. And the buyers, I think lack of demand, yeah, 191, so that's definitely a pretty wide margin between sellers and buyers at the moment. And then the bad news for the Oneros, as I often say, is of course the volumes. These are quite abysmal. The Purifier still slowly heading to a price of less than 30 million ISK, definitely below average, but not as pronounced as some other buy opportunities. 27.4 for the buyers. It's definitely cheap compared to the entire chart, but I think there are better opportunities like the Munin. I really like what I'm seeing here on the Munin this week. If we look at the Purifier chart, you can see that we're nowhere near the low points just yet. Well, not nowhere near, but we're not at the low points just yet. The Saber, that is interesting as well, dipping down to that 67.5 million again, 68.6 for the sellers, 65.1 for the buyers. I do think that the Saber is very interesting again, 65 million on the chart. That is here, 65.1. That is very, very cheap. If you do manage to grab them, I think it's very difficult to do in the interdictors, but if you do manage to grab a couple, you do have some very strong investments there. The Scimitar bumping up from the 200 million mark, so that's a bit of a no for me. Still 195.6 for the buyers. You can still grab them below the chart. And then the Stiletto is back at 30 million ISK. Buyers coming in at 27.4. That's a bit of a no. But yeah, for this week, if you're looking to invest in preparation of a Nullsic war, you get opportunities. Munin is looking great. Saber is looking great. Don't try to buy 100 Sabers in my opinion, but a couple definitely would be nice to have at these prices. And I think the Crow, although it was best to try and grab him last week on this downtrend, it's still well below average at the moment. Next up, we're moving on to the Tech 3 ships coming in at 50.25. Like that. And as always, we'll start with the destroyers. Here is the Confessor, flat below 40 million ISK, 39.98 for the sellers, 37 million for the buyers. And the bad news, I would say, yep, start to keep that in mind. 180 now, 63 here. I am seeing an increase in volume. Still nothing dramatic, nothing to worry too much about, but it is definitely something to keep in mind. For the Hecate, we have a recovery after reaching 50 million back to that normal 40 million, I would say. 40 million for the sellers, 37 for the buyers again. And here that looks more reasonable, 26, 10s, 35 here, nothing too crazy. Next up we have the Jackdaw, went up to 46 million ISK. Maybe the Auto Jackdaw video might have something to do with that. And then maybe also the event when it first launched being so crazy. Actually I lost my Jackdaw to a carrier. Might spur demand a little bit, but yep, selling for 46 million ISK. Buyers coming in at 42.2, and volume wise we do have the 42 here, but nothing else is really crazy. I think if you can produce tactical destroyers, the Jackdaw is your best opportunity. And then we have the Zwepel that is now going back down to 35 million ISK. Okay, interesting. 35.5 for the sellers, 32.7 for the buyers. But again, on the volumes, we do have 101, slight uptick, but nothing too crazy. This still feels like a healthy market, but that Confessor here, that all of a sudden in 2 sellers we get close to 250 of them, is the very first sign that, you know, more production might be on the way and better prices might be on the way as well. For the cruisers, we have the Legion that jumped up to 190, 188 at the moment for the sellers, 174 for the buyers. Availability again is more than reasonable, and yeah, a bit of a jump up. I think some, oh, of course, event again. What will you easily run the Gala in? A Tech 3 cruiser, of course. So the Legion went up to 190, recovering a little bit. The Loki, also a little bit of a jump here, went up to 240, currently selling for 221, buyers coming in at 202. Volumes again quite reasonable. Then we have the Proteus, the least popular one, still a little bit of an increased price here. 173 for the sellers, 157 for the buyers. And again, availability, nothing to worry about. And then finally we get the Tengu, that actually jumped up here as well. In the last couple of days, 186 for the sellers, 178 for the buyers, and availability again is looking okay, considering where the Tech 3 ships are at. So very interesting week here again, in my opinion, for the Tech 3 ships, showing more stability, more affordability. Actually an impact, I think, from the live event, from the Guardians Gala here on the cruisers. And just one little bit of information here that I think I will keep in mind for the upcoming weeks and especially months, because to me, this shows that if this keeps slowly progressing, we might have that same pattern as last year, where the summer knows massive overproduction, not enough activity, not enough demand, but great buy opportunities then, of course, because of just the general situation in the tech tree market and wormhole space, where of course most of the resources come from. So yeah, very interesting one for the future, of course. And then for our extra product this week at 54.25, ice products. I do want to take a look at that with fuel blocks, at least the nitrogen ones jumping up again like that. I want to see what's happening there. We do know that, of course, coolants jumped up as well, but how are these let's see here, not its materials, ice products, how are especially the isotopes doing at the moment, which we've bought some at, I think, low prices. Heavy water is stable at 500, has been so for 600 for the last 4 or 5 months, I would say. And 504 for the sellers, 475 for the buyers. Not much to say there. But then we get the helium isotopes, bit of a recovery, but still well below average. And in fact, at the tail end, under pressure. Interesting, 651 for the sellers, 610 for the buyers. You can see here that we had a nice buy opportunity in January. Hydrogen isotopes still playing with the 1-year low points. 600 ISK, 627.28 for the buyers, sellers, excuse me, 565 for the buyers. That's well below 600 ISK. That is still not bad to try and make some investments in my opinion. Liquid ozone though, that is a nice increased price. Good God, went for less than 100 ISK 5-6 months ago, is now selling for 179, 79% profit, not bad. 165 for the buyers. So liquid ozone definitely up substantially in price. Nitrogen isotopes continuing to its 1-year low point here, 51 for the sellers, 611 for the buyers. So definitely something that you could invest in as well. Oxygen isotopes flat below 900 ISK, and then strontium did make that nice 2-step recovery up to more than 3000 ISK. And did I sell that? Quick look at my ticker or at my trades. Yep, strontium, I sold that for 3200 ISK, currently sellable for 3300 ISK. So I pulled the trigger a little bit too early, but I'm actually happy to see that that recovery happened and that I could take advantage of that. So I'll just jump into the fuel prices then to see if nitrogen fuel blocks 24% increase again. Is that a bit of an anomaly? Let's take a look at that. It's in my extra. Helium fuel blocks are going up in price though, but not in the 28k range just yet. So we've got 20,000 for the sellers, 19,000 for the buyers. That feels a bit more doable, a bit more reasonable. Same thing with hydrogen fuel blocks. You can see we did increase in price. We're not at the super low prices anymore. 20,600 for the sellers, 19,000 again for the buyers. Nitrogen fuel blocks has that crazy pattern. Look at these volumes, look at that price range on the median daily averages, but that is going to get stomped very quickly. I think still sellers now 28,300. We'll need some to come in, and buyers have been forced up to 22,000 all of a sudden. So it's really a nitrogen fuel block thing. Incredible volumes. That increased price like that is an anomaly. I thought, are we looking at a general increase in price? That's what I wanted to check. It's a general increase in price, but not as crazy as what it could be. Oxygen, though, going back up to 24,900 as well. Buyers still at 19,200 though, so any supply increase is going to dive that price down to probably 23,000 ISK, I would say, for the sellers. Is something that they might be able to achieve, considering that the nitrogen fuel blocks buyers are up to 20,000 at this point. So there is a willingness in the market, I think, to go higher in prices for fuel blocks. And I think the main culprit of this volatility now and these increased prices is the PI market, of course. Stuff like that, if you're producing fuel blocks, is not that great. Let's see what else is needed. So we do have enriched uranium, oxygen. So that's all PI. Then you have the heavy water. Is that quick check? Because heavy water, that's actually pretty stable. Back to this, please. Then we get isotope. We do have the strontium as well. That went up, so that's gonna put a bit of pressure on that as well. And then the liquid ozone Is that the massive increase? Yeah, and then the liquid ozone as well. So very interesting how these isotopes are still, a lot of them at these 1-year low points, but so many of the other materials needed in fuel blocks are increasing in price all of a sudden. Liquid ozone, here is strontium, and then here we also have coolants, enriched uranium, all of these at 1-year high points, and despite that we are still basically selling these goods at less than average prices. Makes for an interesting market in my opinion, and makes for some very nice volatility. If you happen to have some nitrogen fuel blocks that you bought for less than 19,000 ISK, and you can actually sell some of these on the way down here for 27,000, that is a very, very nice trade to make. Crazy situation, crazy percentage this week on the nitrogen fuel blocks, and if anyone has like an explanation for that, you don't have to give away all your trade secrets, but I would love to know exactly what's happening here in the fuel block market. Definitely put that in the comments. And that's going to be it for this week, guys. 1 hour of ETH talk. Thank you very much for watching if you're still around here, and I'll see you all next time.